Winter is hard here. Across Ukraine there are rolling power cuts. Unable to seal victory on the battlefield, the Russian army has ruthlessly targeted the civilian infrastructure, power networks, heating plants and other installations. Air raid sirens have become the daily soundtrack in the lives of so many Ukrainians as Russia fires missiles from land, sea and air. Putin is quite simply trying to destroy the will of the Ukrainian people, but so far has shown little signs of succeeding, and it's almost a year since the invasion began. In January 2022, the world heard the drumbeat of war. Russian armies were massing on the borders of Ukraine. The Russians denied they were about to invade. They claimed it was all a training exercise. But on the 24th of February,
мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции.
Tens of thousands of Russian troops and tanks, backed by planes, missiles and the Black Sea Fleet, surged into Ukraine, a sovereign European country. It was a full-scale invasion. The odds looked overwhelming. But the Ukrainians, led by a president who had until recently been a comedian, decided to stand and fight.
Ми на своїй землі. Ми нічого і нікого не боїмось.
Kiev did not fall. Was it possible that Vladimir Putin, master strategist, had bitten off more than he could chew? There are no civilian flights to Ukraine anymore. To get there, you have to travel to a land border and cross on foot. This is the last stop before the border in Poland, a place called Przemysl. These are refugees fleeing to the west. So far, there have been millions. Many of them come from the east of Ukraine. Europe has not seen scenes like this since the Balkan Wars. Ukraine is divided into 24 regions known as oblasts, plus the semi-autonomous Republic of Crimea. 11 are fully or partly occupied by invading forces. The Russians have surrounded the capital Kiev and moved further into the eastern oblasts of the Donbass. They've also pushed along the south coast in the hopes of taking the key southern city of Odessa. No one knows how far they will advance or whether the country will stand, but Ukrainian resistance is ferocious. With Western-supplied anti-tank missiles and intelligence, the Ukrainian armed forces have imposed a huge cost on the Russians, but they are still seriously outgunned. This is the biggest armed conflict in Europe since the Second World War, and I'm here to report on it. We head first to the western city of Lviv. Lviv is known as one of the great cultural hubs of Ukraine. Great buildings, fantastic art going back to the 13th century. And while it's been comparatively unscathed by the war, people here are taking no chances of their beloved city and have done everything they can to protect the buildings and sculpture here, such as the cladding on the building behind me and wrapping some of the sculptures. 1 month into the war, and no one could have expected the Russian army to have been stalled, let alone the reports that the Ukrainian forces have retaken territory. It's a remarkable military turnaround if all that proves to be true, which it appears to be. It's probably fair to say that a lot of that in great part has come as a result from the leadership of President Zelensky. And I think it's probably fair to say that he's definitely off Vladimir Putin's Christmas card list. The ascent of Volodymyr Zelensky goes to prove that truth is stranger than fiction. He was the creator and star of a Ukrainian TV show called Servant of the People.
Дайте мне 10 минут спокойно сосредоточиться.
A political satire about an honest school teacher who accidentally becomes president of Ukraine.
Доброе утро, господин президент.
And yet, in 2019, in the real world, Zelensky himself was elected to that office. He was widely derided by political opponents, and the general expectation was that the Russian President Vladimir Putin would eat him for breakfast. But when the Russians invaded, Zelensky made his position crystal clear.
Я залишаюсь тут, залишаюсь у Києві і нікого не боюсь, стільки, скільки потрібно, щоб перемогти у цій нашій вітчизняній війні.
He ordered all men of fighting age to remain in the country. He made a plea to the international community for support. In that moment, and in the nightly addresses he has made every day since then, he has had one message: resist.
Всі ми тут, наші військові тут, громадяни суспільства тут, всі ми тут. Захищаємо нашу незалежність, нашу державу. І так буде і далі. Слава нашим захисникам, слава нашим захисницям. Слава Україні!
And resist they have. On the first day of the war, the Russians attempted to land paratroopers at Hostomel Airport, only a few miles from Kiev. Their intention was to take the capital quickly and to decapitate the government. But Ukrainian resistance was ferocious. Russian helicopters were shot down with portable anti-aircraft systems, and the main force of Russian troop planes was unable to land. The Russians did take the airport after 2 days of heavy fighting, but by then their hopes of a lightning victory were over. Elsewhere, the Ukrainians have been doing some decapitating of their own. Faced with a huge disadvantage in terms of armour, the Ukrainians have been using portable anti-tank missiles, provided mainly by the Americans and Brits. Working in small units, they've used drones, often consumer models, to spot targets, causing chaos for the invaders. For now, the Russians have been ground to a halt. But the situation is still dire. The Ukrainians are improvising a desperate defence against what is reputed to be the second most powerful military on the planet. In these opening weeks of the conflict, one small place has come to exemplify the Ukrainian spirit of defiance. Snake Island, a tiny rock in the Black Sea. Not much to look at, but in naval terms, it's a strategically vital position near the mouth of the Danube. The Russian Navy demanded that the 13 Ukrainian border guards posted to the island surrender on February 24th. This is a tape of the conversation which ensued. It has been reported that they paid for this bravado with their lives. The cost and casualties on both sides has been staggering. In Lviv and across Ukraine, soldiers' funerals take place with grim regularity. In this ceremony, 3 servicemen are being buried, having been killed in fighting in the east. This is clearly a population which is bearing the losses of war with pride and strength as well as grief. It can be hard working as a photographer on occasions such as this. It sometimes feels like an intrusion. But equally, the Ukrainians need the world to see what's happening. So far, anyway, it seems like they want us here. The civilian toll too is high. Wave after wave of people have been displaced from the areas of fighting. So I'm outside Lviv railway station, which is just a teeming mass of humanity, mainly women and children, trolley bags, baggage. And they've arrived from all over Ukraine. Extraordinary. Can't imagine what it's like to have your life completely disrupted in this way and just to be cast adrift.
Меня зовут Алина, мы приехали из города Мелитополь, Запорожская область.
So where are you going now? Where are you hoping to go?
Мы планируем поехать в Болгарию к своей сестре. Там они работают, живут, и мы со своим племянником едем сейчас к ним.
Describe the situation where you came from.
В Мелитополе 24 числа в 5:30 утра начались взрывы. После этого еще было несколько взрывов. Началась война по всей Украине, как поняла, по южной стороне Украины. Было очень страшно. Я с ребенком была в тот момент. И было принято решение немножко подождать и ехать уже за границу, так как было небезопасно оставаться в Мелитополе. Мы не знаем, что будет дальше через неделю, поэтому лучше пока тихо мы уехали оттуда, с Мелитополя. У нас в жилые дома попадали тоже осколки ракет. У нас сбивают эти ракеты, но осколки попадают в жилые дома. И пока мы остались целы, наш дом остался цел, мы решили выехать оттуда, потому что мы не знаем, возможно, следующий дом будет наш. Очень страшно, да.
It's just utterly chaotic. And you can tell just by looking at the faces of people, the kind of uncertainty. Not so much fear, just a sort of confusion as to what lies ahead for them all. Well, we've just had an air raid siren go off here. I'm outside Lviv railway station. This is the first time I've heard the sirens go off here in the city since I've arrived. There doesn't seem to be any panic. People seem quite resigned to this, but it's an eerie sound, and who knows what it might mean this time. As we know, Lviv has been hit in the past, but only at strategic locations, not in the heart of the city. But it's a terrifying sound. Sadly familiar scene, certainly in historical terms, here in Europe. We thought this was all over a long time ago. Second World War, Bosnia. But here we are again. People fleeing conflict. People who don't know where they're going. People who have left behind tremendous destruction and a future that is very uncertain. We thought it was all in the past, but here it is, on our doorstep, in Europe, in 2022. The Russians have been firing wave after wave of missiles at Ukraine. They come from the Black Sea Fleet, from strategic bombers in Russian airspace and that of its ally, Belarus. The city of Lviv itself has got off relatively lightly so far, but you wonder if a certain complacency is creeping in. The effect of a hit somewhere like this, packed with people, does not bear thinking about. And, as if on cue, Lviv receives its first hits in a couple of weeks. We need to be careful here. The Ukrainian government forbids pictures that reveal too much about damage in the immediate aftermath of strikes. We also don't want to risk being in the vicinity of a secondary strike, so we head for high ground and look for a vantage point so we can document from a distance. So we had the sirens about an hour or so ago, probably even less. A lot of sirens, ambulances, emergency vehicles rushing around Lviv. And behind me is the reason. 3 explosions, strikes on an unknown target at this time, reports of either a fuel dump, a communications centre or some kind of base, but certainly a lot of black smoke billowing in the distance from the location of the strike. There have been many missile strikes on civilian areas, but no city has been more devastated than Mariupol on the south coast of the Oblast of Donetsk. Russian forces have placed it under siege. So far, the mayor of the city has estimated that 80 to 90% of the city has been destroyed. The bombardment has been merciless. There's a furious battle taking place around the Azovstal steelworks, where Ukrainian forces are under siege. Around a week ago, the Russians bombed the drama theatre in Mariupol. Inside were sheltering what was rumoured to be upwards of 1,000 people. Outside in the car park had been painted the word Детей, Russian for children. It was visible from space, as this satellite image from UNESCO proves. The number of dead is unknown. Vika is a refugee who has just arrived here from Mariupol. Until a few days ago, she lived in the centre of the city. She is a woman who has literally just experienced her world being blown to pieces around her and her family.
The first shot, we were in the kitchen, me and my mom, and we just laid down. And second one, we did the same. So during that time, he was outside. I heard people were saying that one guy was injured, and then our neighbor said, "It's your father, Vicky." I couldn't imagine that it's my father. It's some guy, but not my father. Then I rushed down, and he was laying on the floor with the blood from his body, with the hole, this big hole in his back. We were lucky enough living in the city center, and there was police, and it saved him that they were fast. And then we went to the hospital.
And after your father was wounded, in the days following that, presumably the situation became progressively worse.
The tragedy of our city is that we were trapped. You know, here's you, and from all the sides you see and you feel now that you are trapped already.
Did you have a basement? Was there a place that you eventually went to?
Yes, we had a basement, but you might understand that there is dark, there is dust, there is no oxygen, no water, and you cannot spend all the day in the basement, all the week in the basement. You need to cook, you need to go to the washroom.
What was the worst moment for you and your family?
The target was our block of flats, and that was the worst day. To the roof, another roof, another building, and then they burned 5th floor. From the 5th floor to the 4th floor, from the 4th floor to my apartment. So this is the worst moment when you are helpless, when you're trapped. So now you even don't have You don't have walls.
Did you think you would survive at that moment?
I was very angry because I put so much effort every day. Every day I repeated myself that I will do everything to survive. I will not. It was their like a game between me and them. They want to kill me. I want to survive. So I do my best. But that moment, I had no hope.
Could you see Russian soldiers at this time?
Yes.
Yes, you could. Yes.
Next day, me and my mom decided that we don't want like us to die there. So we decided to run with the then don't look back. And then just the next neighborhood, there was Russian soldiers there. We thought that they are, like monsters, like people say. But you look at him, he looks pretty much similar to me. He's from Donetsk. He's got university education. He had a job. He has a family. Like, he looks normal. If you change his clothes, he's just like me and you. This is the worst, I think. You understand this, that the enemy, that they're killing us, but you cannot believe. Yes, we asked them where to go because there were no Ukrainian soldiers anymore. But you want to survive, so we asked.
So they weren't aggressive towards you in a verbal sense or face to face.
Not at all. Not at all. It's a person like me and you, and I still cannot believe that he did it. I mean, I cannot put it in my head, because I don't see any particular difference between me and him.
At what point did you leave your parents?
I was at the hospital with no hope. I was searching for cars, for people, and then eventually the young man who we were studying with, we both are engineers, so he was searching for his friend. I said like, Vova, is it you? He said, yes, it's me. He hugged me. He saw in what condition I am, and I said, Vova, please take me out of there. And he said, yes. Like, what? He said, yes. And 5 minutes, I just grabbed my stuff, and he, with another people, he helped me to get out.
Did you get a chance to say goodbye to your mother and father?
Yes, just 1 minute. Just 1 minute, yes, to hug them and say goodbye. But they said, yes, I must go. Because, again, my father, he needed medical treatment, and if I can get out of there, probably I could help them too.
Let me ask you this. What now? You're in Lviv now. Your intention is to cross the border into Poland?
I don't want to be a refugee, actually. I want to be a part of some society, to contribute to society, to work, to build a career, to meet someone, probably.
Can you see yourself going back to Mariupol?
There is no Mariupol anymore. There is no city. Everything destroyed. So, like, if you're saying, will you come back to Mariupol, where will I come back? There is not only my apartment destroyed, all the apartments, all.
How has this changed any relationship or your attitude towards Russia and towards Russians?
You want me to say that I hate Russians, or like I realize that they are not people, I don't know, they are monsters.
Can you forgive them?
I don't know. I don't know who. You are saying, can you forgive them? Whom? Them? Soldiers or state or president? I still have friends in Russia. I visited them in St. Petersburg last year. They are very distinct members of society. They are teachers. They are very kind. I mean, I cannot put it together. I cannot hate them. I understand they could change the situation. They could, I don't know what they could do. I understand it, but no, you're asking about feeling. No, I don't have any feeling towards them. Maybe for now.
It's early morning, just after the lifting of curfew in Lviv, and we're heading out of the city en route for the capital, Kiev, which is something in the region of about 500 kilometers away. So it's going to be a long day, and not without its potential hazards. Obviously having to skirt and avoid those areas where Russian troops or Russian forces might be, but that's never easy because things are shifting on the ground all the time. But it is going to be a long day, that's for sure, and a little bit of a nervous one as well. So sort of a couple of hours into the journey now, just in the distance quite a lot of black smoke, which is apparently the aftermath of strikes on an oil depot in Lutsk yesterday, so it's obviously still burning. It's interesting as every community seems to have set up checkpoints, sandbag emplacements have blocked the roads, which kind of suggests that at every stage from the grassroots up, they would resist the Russians coming through every step. It's just as well actually we have a driver that doesn't know where they're going, because I certainly would have no idea, given that just about every road sign has been removed along the highway here, obviously to confuse any advancing Russian forces. Just a few miles back we actually passed some sort of traffic engineers dismantling some of the last remaining road signs. So it's very strange to drive along a motorway like this and not see any road signs. It's only on the road that you start to get a sense of the scale of this massive country. As a modern state, Ukraine came into being in 1917 as the Russian Empire began its full collapse after the Bolshevik Revolution. In the civil war that followed, a fledgling Ukrainian state arose, the Ukrainian People's Republic. It claimed territory from well into Poland all the way to the borders of Georgia. But it soon had a competitor, the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. The Russian-backed Ukrainian communists defeated the nationalists, and the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic was made part of the USSR in 1921. But the idea of Ukrainian independence did not die, and Joseph Stalin took notice. Under the guise of collectivization, Stalin engineered a famine in Ukraine from 1932 to 1933. Estimates of the dead start at 3.5 million. These pictures were taken by an Austrian eyewitness. The famine became known as the Holodomor, meaning death by starvation, and it leaves a deep scar on the Ukrainian psyche to this day. In 1939, Hitler and Stalin signed a non-aggression pact. Poland was the first victim, its lands being carved up between the Third Reich and the USSR. What's now Western Ukraine, including the city of Lviv, used to be Eastern Poland. It was scythed off and made part of the territory of Soviet Ukraine. In 1941, Hitler tore up the non-aggression pact, launching a huge invasion of the USSR. Ukraine was brutalised once again as the Nazi legions rolled across it. The Germans brought with them the Holocaust. In Kiev, at the site known as Babyn Yar, over 30,000 Jews were murdered in just one day. The Germans exploited Ukrainian nationalist aspirations. One Ukrainian faction became complicit in the Nazi Holocaust and also the ethnic cleansing of Poles living in the west of Ukraine. It's worth mentioning that many countries in Europe had their own homegrown fascist movement in the 1930s. There was a Ukrainian volunteer SS Legion, but the same can be said for just about every Nazi-occupied country, from Belgium to Romania, and indeed Russia itself. The idea being spread that modern Ukraine is somehow a Nazi or fascist state is a lie. The Soviet Red Army mounted its colossal counterattacks, and epic tank battles took place across the plains of Russia and Ukraine. The Nazi armies were defeated. When the Second World War ended, Ukraine kept its new borders. And in 1954, as a gift between fraternal republics of the USSR, the Republic of Crimea was gifted to Ukraine. But only after Stalin had deported tens of thousands of its indigenous population, the Tatars, to Siberia. And so things were to remain until 1991. So here we are, coming into the very heart of Kiev, crossing the Dnieper River. There's been an announcement by the Russians after the peace talks, or the ceasefire talks, with the Ukrainians in Turkey, that they will, and I quote, drastically reduce their attacks here in the Ukrainian capital. But let's wait and see how that pans out over the coming hours and days. Our colleague Olya is a native of Kiev, but she evacuated to Lviv when the Russians invaded. No one knew if the city would fall. This is the first time she's been home in weeks.
So how does it feel to be home?
Oh, fantastic.
We spend an uneasy first night. In the distance, all around the city, you can hear shell fire, a mix of outgoing Ukrainian artillery and air defence and Russian shells. So here I am overlooking Kiev and the Dnieper River with these crucial bridges that are heavily defended in the city. It's 36 days into the war. Half the population have gone. If there's one thing that strikes me about this place right now is it's spookily quiet. It's like some kind of invisible pestilence has descended on the place. Just look at that. That bridge would normally be bustling and it's virtually empty. Though not quiet last night. We had a lot of shelling around the city's sort of perimeter, despite the talks in Turkey yesterday and the so-called reduction of attacks by Russia. It's understandable why people continue to stay away from the city and are continuing to leave, although most of those that want to leave have already gone. This is a chilling place. We're close to the centre of Kiev. It's a quiet neighbourhood. The people here are not well off. Nearby, there's a TV tower which was targeted on the 1st of March. There were collateral hits on this civilian area. Several people died here, and the survivors' lives have been wrecked.
Просто, например, вот у нас, как Лычко сказал, 4 дома, а вот этот, например, напротив дом, мы тоже пострадали. И куда не обращаемся, как бы...
1551 это город.
Ну, я уже 2 раза звонила.
Надо звонить еще. Ну, как бы волонтеры помогут, я уверена. Просто, видимо, очень все перегружены сейчас.
Спасибо, вы извините, что я...
А чем они помогут волонтеры?
Obviously massive airstrike, or at least shelling or rocketing. But it's taken out, what, 1, 2, 3 blocks? Totally wiped out. You can still hear the artillery though. It's actually quite intense over there. But I can't see anyone living here for the foreseeable future. Can we just ask what happened here and when did it happen?
Первый вопрос. Что здесь произошло и когда это произошло?
Это произошло несколько дней назад. Сюда во двор упала ракета. Вот, и вследствие чего умер один человек, один из жителей этого дома, и несколько человек были эвакуированы в больницу.
And people are moving out now, yeah? There are many people remaining here?
В каждом доме около 10 человек.
Thanks very much. Thank you. By 1991, the Cold War, which had pitted capitalist West against communist East for 45 years, was over. The Warsaw Pact and USSR were dissolved in 1991. Russia reorganised itself as the centre of a new alliance, the Commonwealth of Independent States. Ukraine was a founder member of this alliance, but never fully committed to it. The Ukrainian people voted for independence in a referendum in 1991. Every oblast, including those in the east and the Republic of Crimea, voted in favour of joining the new Ukraine. The Ukrainian military turned over its remaining stockpile of nuclear weapons to Russia in exchange for a guarantee of territorial integrity. In the years to come, many former Warsaw Pact countries would turn to the West, joining both the European Union and NATO. This, needless to say, did not please the Russians. Well, here I am in the Kyiv metro. We've obviously had to have permission to get in here because obviously it's regarded as an important place, and there are obviously still people that have used it as shelters and continue to use it as shelters, not least in this district, which has seen a lot of intense bombardment. I think for the first time I actually feel quite safe in this part of Kyiv, certainly from any bombardment, because this is a long way down. Because they were built originally at the height of the Cold War for nuclear attacks. Incredible. Tents, mattresses, food deliveries. Presumably some of these people have been down here for some considerable time. But yeah, pretty well organised. One of the lines at the station is running. On the other, trains are stationary and being used as temporary accommodation.
давно тут?
А зараз менше, але не дуже багато. А це було дуже багато.
Я була саме тут на Дорогожичах, ну я якось не пригадую.
Так, ми були багато тут, не можна було пройти. А потім вже бачите, палатки не стали.
Це вже така цивілізація.
Through the 2000s, Ukraine was torn between two political centres of gravity, Russia and Europe, East and West. Their presidential politics reflected this. Russian-leaning Viktor Yanukovych was declared winner of an election in 2004, which was widely seen as corrupt. The result was overturned after popular protests, and the new winner was Viktor Yushchenko. Yushchenko had not been long in office, however, when he suffered an assassination attempt. The method, dioxin poisoning, which left him permanently disfigured. Culprit or culprits, never determined. Yanukovych was elected president in 2010 in elections which were deemed free and fair. He used his mandate to swing Ukraine back towards Russia. He put a stop to Ukraine's proposed accession to the EU and accepted bailout loans from Russia. This did not go down well with the young people of Ukraine, and mass protests in January 2014 were met with violent force on Maidan Square in the heart of Kiev. The events of those days became known as the Revolution of Dignity, and the protest movement as Euromaidan. Thousands of students and young people faced off against special police units. The youth of Ukraine made their preference clear, and it was for a European future. Our colleague Olya was there, an eyewitness and participant. What do you remember about those days? You were here then.
Well, it was here was amazing atmosphere, and everything starts from students who came here to protest against this decision. It starts like normally. It was a huge amount of people. So lots of people, friends of mine, and just ordinary people all over the Ukraine came here to stay here, and it was cool here. So it was like music there. But then the state starts to make these people go home using the force.
Initially, Yanukovych tried to scare the protesters into leaving. He was banking on the idea that parents would call their children home. But many of the older generation chose instead to join the young people in the square. Each day, more people came, and soon there were thousands. They built barricades around Maidan to protect themselves, as well as settlements and camps. It was not going to be an easy win for Yanukovych. There was a mixture of people from different layers of society. Labourers and business people worked together on the barricades. Surgeons took shifts in first aid shelters. It seemed to represent a broad societal response to oppression and to indicate clear support for a westward-facing policy.
The thing is that people who came to Maidan, they have no weapon, and they were fighting with just with their hands, their smiles, the words, and with the truth. On Maidan, we were fighting for liberty and for dignity. And we know that truth is on our side.
But it did become very violent. I mean, there were some very violent scenes. I remember seeing photographs of the time.
It was violent in January.
In January, the violence got worse. Police started using stun grenades, rubber bullets and tear gas. Protesters responded with paving stones and Molotov cocktails. They created cover with smoke from burning tyres. They improvised protective equipment, builders' helmets, bike helmets, ski masks, even kitchen pots. People used snowboards as shields. And still, the numbers swelled.
It was extremely cold. It was minus 16 in the night, and police enforced people to go home with the water.
Parliament passed harsh anti-protest laws to try to keep a lid on things. They mimicked similar draconian laws which had been used in Russia for many years. For instance, face-covering masks were made illegal. Then came 3 days in February which are indelible in the history of Ukraine. The government began to use lethal force.
The escalation was on 19th till 20th of February when people were killed, just literally killed by snipers.
More than 100 protesters were killed by the pro-government forces. It was a revolutionary moment.
Oh, well, basically from Maidan, it was like a start of Ukrainian nation. So we were so united here, and we was fighting for our freedom and for our choice and for our willing to move toward the Europe. We were fighting for our independence and to do what we want to do exactly. And Yanukovych was the president, he was like pro-Russian president. He was from Donetsk, and he had good connection with Kremlin. So that was the revolution against him, his decision, Russia's decision, and the only thing we aimed for is just to choose what we do really want.
Yanukovych, by now under serious international pressure, folded. He made a deal to hold elections, but immediately fled the country to Russia, where he has remained ever since. Today, Maidan Square is cordoned off with barricades and guarded by watchful troops. We have to be careful where we point our cameras. The heart of government is just a couple of blocks away, and Kiev is surrounded on 3 sides by the Russian army. In the aftermath of the Euromaidan protests, Putin did not sit still. In the power vacuum that followed Yanukovych's exit, the Russians made their move. They infiltrated and annexed Crimea. In the eastern oblasts of Donetsk and Luhansk, armed and Russian-backed separatists declared independent people's republics. I was there in the first few years of this new conflict and met some of the massed young men on the streets of Donetsk who were its early foot soldiers. The fighting transformed into trench warfare, in which the front lines cut through densely populated areas. Civilians paid a terrible price, among them Nadia Kalashnikova. I photographed her with her youngest child. She lost both her eldest daughter and her left leg in a separatist rocket attack in her home village in Luhansk Oblast. The conflict was to remain in stasis for the next 8 years. The reaction of the international community to all this was muted. Putin was appeased, and that was something the world and the Ukrainians would come to regret. So, early morning, leaving Kiev, fortress city. Seems a bit quieter this morning than it was yesterday for sure. Heading back to Lviv now, but I have a strong feeling that we're back in this city sometime in the near future. Ideally, it would be great to visit when there wasn't a war, but let's see how things go over the coming weeks and months. There's a late fall of snow as we cross back into Poland. The train is packed with refugees heading for a future as uncertain as that of their country. Behind me, this huge Soviet socialist realist sculpture commemorating the great anti-fascist fight that the Soviet Union conducted during the Second World War. It's quite ironic standing here beneath it as Ukraine fights an existential battle against what many people now regard as a fascist totalitarian state, which is modern-day Russia. It's a case of history turned upside down. The most violent armed conflict that Europe has seen since the Second World War has been in progress in Ukraine for 5 months. Putin's so-called special military operation was meant to last days, but it has not gone according to plan. When we left Kiev in March, it was surrounded by Russian forces. But the invaders were already being outboxed. Russian convoys became bogged down, harried by Ukrainian attacks, many using drones and Western-supplied anti-tank missiles. In April, Ukrainian resistance forced them to withdraw. In the wake of their retreat, devastated cities and what appears to be evidence of war crimes. The Ukrainians scored a significant victory with the sinking of the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet, the Moskva. They also retook the tiny strategic rock known as Snake Island. It turned out that the island's defenders had not been killed in February, but captured. The Russian Air Force has failed to achieve air superiority. Ukrainian fighters are still in the air, and Russian planes and attack helicopters are being shot down regularly. In the south, the Russians pulverized the city of Mariupol into surrender and rubble. Some estimates place the death toll in that city alone as high as 100,000. But the defense of Mariupol caused the Russian advance on the coast to stall at Kherson. Ukraine has fought back and held the line. This is the 6th month of the war, and we're heading back to Ukraine. There are fewer people at the border crossing, but the wave of displaced people is staggering. As of late July, a couple of weeks ago, just under 6 million refugees had fled Ukraine. And within the borders of Ukraine itself, there's another 6 million displaced. These are trucks, mainly empty, waiting at the border to leave and come back with goods and supplies. The line is many kilometers long. We take the night train to Kiev and find the city far more at ease with itself than the one we left in March. Well, I'm back here in the centre of Kiev at the Maidan. Last time I was here was in March, and the war at that point was at a very precarious point with the Russians effectively at the gates of the capital. We're 6 months into the war now, and to some extent the Russians are a little bit on the back foot. It's a hell of a lot more busy than it was when I was here in March. And of course at that time Russian rockets and missiles were still slamming into the city, and it was very, very tense indeed. with many people fleeing both westwards and indeed across neighbouring borders into Poland and elsewhere. Many of those people have now obviously returned, not the entire population, but it is busier now. Having said that, there is growing tension around the nuclear station at Zaporizhzhia, and, you know, a little bit of nervousness around, and perhaps we could see people leaving the city again in the near future. But for the moment, it's a lively place. Cafes are full and almost normal looking. Although having said that, just a second, the air raid siren's gone off, so war's never far away. Indeed, this is a conflict which has been defined by its proximity both to Europe and Russia. The Ukrainian people are clearly gravitating towards the West. Russian strategy seems to stem from a sense of loss and underlying ownership of Ukrainian lands. The Russians want to reclaim what they imagine to be theirs. Russia has tried to isolate Ukraine from the West by strangling oil and gas supplies. They've interrupted Ukraine's grain exports, vital to world food supply, via the southern ports. An uneasy agreement brokered by Turkey in July, however, has permitted grain shipments to leave Ukraine by sea. Russian troops, thwarted by Ukrainian resistance, have occupied Europe's largest nuclear plant in Zaporizhzhia Oblast. This is a way to shield their soldiers and vehicles which can't be shelled at that location, but also to threaten Ukraine's internal energy supply. Ukraine's near allies Poland and the Baltic states have been rock solid, united in their fear of a resurgent Russia. Other Western governments led by the US have appeared galvanised rather than intimidated by the conflict. The supply of the US battlefield missile system, known as HIMARS for example, has allowed the armed forces of Ukraine to outmatch Russian mass artillery with precision long-range strikes. In short, the war in Ukraine seems to have become a proxy war between the West and Russia, between two conflicting value systems, the neo-fascist leanings of a would-be Russian empire, a closed society where dissent is violently stifled, and, for better or for worse, the open societies of the West. We are heading to Borodyanka, one of the towns north of Kiev which was abandoned by the Russians in April. Parts of it have been devastated. You know, there's a number of scavenging dogs here, but there is a lot of garbage and the place does stink. The dogs themselves look quite quiet at the moment, but by all accounts they're fairly volatile and probably quite traumatised after everything that's going on here. But I'm a little bit wary of them, if truth be told. These are apartment blocks here in Borodyanka that were hit by Russian airstrikes. Behind me, though, are a few banners that locals have actually put up in the past weeks. It's a bit of a controversy because many of these people want these flats to be demolished and rebuilt so they can continue to live here. Others, including some local officials, would like some kind of memorial to mark the kind of atrocity that went on here itself. So it's kind of split the community somewhat. The main thing is that most people here appear to want to stay. This was a very close, tight community. This is the statue of the great Ukrainian poet and painter Taras Shevchenko. Clearly, during the month-long occupation by Russian forces here, they decided to make their mark not just on the surrounding apartment blocks, which have been completely eviscerated by airstrikes and shelling, but obviously took their spite out on this statue. You know, it's another indication of an attack not just on Ukraine, but Ukrainian culture and anything that represents Ukraine's sense of nationhood or independence from Moscow. We meet Natalia, a local woman who lived through the Russian assault and its consequences. Natalia, you're from Borodyanko, yeah?
Yes.
Yes. Have you lived here all your life?
Yes, of your life.
All your life. On the buildings opposite, there are banners, you know, that locals have put up. Obviously, people who want these apartment blocks to be rebuilt. Do you agree with that?
Чесно, мені все рівно, де відбудують будинок. Чи на цьому місці, чи в іншому, головне, щоб це почали робити. А тут, ну, тут люди хочуть жити тут, на цьому місці, бо це центр Бородянки, тут зручне розташування, і люди хочуть саме на цьому місці свої будинки. Ну, десь відсотків, мабуть, 80 хочуть залишитись тут жити. І саме в цих відбудованих будинках.
Can I take you back to, obviously, the time of the Russian invasion and the occupation here? What was it like for you and your family and your daughter?
1 березня, я тут була, 1 березня, коли були тут танки, заїхали, ми сховалися в підвал. Ну і в цей час авіаудар був по моєму будинку.
Потім поїхали кудись, вдалося в тепло.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Да, зараз я орендую квартиру тут недалечко. Все повертається, відкриваються магазинчики, відкриваються, інфраструктура помаленьку відбудовується.
Is your husband in the armed services and the forces here in Ukraine?
Чоловік загинув. Військовий.
Okay. Did you ever think that Russia was capable of doing this here in Ukraine?
Ні, навіть до останнього. Навіть коли 24 лютого я встала збиратись на роботу, і мені чоловік сказав, що почалась війна. Я думала, ну це так, це може щось там день-два, якісь конфлікти будуть, і все ж це закінчиться на цьому. Такого не може бути в 21 столітті.
Not far from Borodyanka, hidden in the forest, is a wee village called Moschun. This is where one of the pivotal battles in the struggle for Kiev took place in February and March. The men of the Ukrainian 72nd Mechanized Brigade were ordered to fight to the last man. They took on vastly superior numbers of Russians. If Moschun had fallen, there's every chance Kiev could have been overrun. It's staggering just driving through here. Every other building, every other house has been destroyed. It's just, the levels of devastation are really, really stark around here. The evidence of heavy bombardment is everywhere. This is how I imagine the battle for Ukraine to be. This is the kind of place I imagine where, you know, the future of the country is decided in many ways. Not just the big cities, but in smaller communities where the resistance is fiercest. Absolutely incredible here. We can't show you the checkpoint that marks the entrance of the village, but we've been given permission to film something of interest. The hanged effigy of a Russian soldier. I suppose to many people looking at this, that might seem rather tasteless, but you know, given what we've witnessed over the last few days in various places here, one can understand the degree of anger. But there is an element of humour. As one of the soldiers here pointed out, this effigy of a Russian soldier, he does have his shopping bag with him. He's just been for his groceries, and he is carrying an umbrella. But it is a rather creepy image nonetheless. This is a comparatively small community, but it played a significant part in the defence of Kyiv in the early stages of the war. And it paid an enormous price for that, which you can see across the entire village. The level of destruction is immense. You really do have to be careful moving around here. There are warning signs of unexploded devices, minefields, and there's also the danger, of course, that the Russian troops that came through here left booby traps. We meet Vadim, a local baker who took part as a civilian in the defence of Mostyun. Can you talk me through those early days of the war in February?
Воно почалось з утра. Мене збудила дружина. Говорить, щось гримить. Я виглянув в вікно, говорю, вставай, почалась війна. У нас з вікна видно аеропорт Гостомель, як прилетіли туди перший снаряд.
People say that, military people particularly, say that the defence of Mostyun was crucial, and that if Mostyun had fallen, the gates to Kiev were open to the Russians. Would you agree with that?
100%. 72-га зайшла вечором, 24-го. 12 БМП-шок, ми їх зустріли в центрі. Сережа Марханос, наш отважний пожарник. Ліс знає хорошо, в нього трактор свій. Завів, розставив їх у лісі на червоному. Ми знаємо, де, кого, куди ставити. Ми місні, ми знаємо тут все.
Do you have any idea of the numbers of defenders that were engaged in the battle?
Ну, по військовим там було більше, ніж 80 людей. А з гражданських все село. Ті були на складах, ті на охранній гостиниці, ті на бліндажах копали, ті готові. Моя дружина і братова 12 днів хліб місили, що і об'єдналися. Я такого села я взагалі не бачив.
How is life for people that have returned?
Нас дуже багато. Кажемо, 80% всього нашого села, Мощуна і дач знищено. Просто знищено. І дуже багато треба стройматеріалу. Треба людям перезимувати цю зиму.
How does the population now compare with before the war?
На дачах, що світла нема, там трохи задач меншиться. А в Мощуні, ну, чоловік 700 назад вернулось спокійно.
How do you feel about the Russians now?
Такої нації для нашого народу, ну, моя думка, вона просто пропала. Винна вся Росія тим, що ну, люди ж розуміють, що їхній бункерний, він не прав.
Vladimir Putin has been president, acting president, or prime minister of Russia since 1999. He was a lieutenant colonel in the KGB. Stationed in East Berlin in 1989, he witnessed the collapse of communism. The Russia he eventually took over was the imploded heart of a superpower. As former Warsaw Pact countries turned to the west, Putin held on to the near territories of Russia through a series of brutal wars. He prevented the breakaway of the Republic of Chechnya, and in 2008, Russia launched an invasion of the independent country of Georgia.
I was there and witnessed scenes eerily reminiscent of those in Ukraine. It's almost an identical playbook. Russian troops were sent in to protect two Georgian oblasts, each with Russian-speaking populations. Both are now led by puppet regimes who have declared the desire to join Russia. In July 2021, Vladimir Putin published a long and seemingly heartfelt essay about Ukraine. In it, he argued for the indivisibility of the Russian and Ukrainian people. He talks about a triune nation made up of Russians, Ukrainians and Belarusians. This is a way of thinking which harked back not just to the USSR, but to the Russian Empire. In this worldview, the idea of Ukrainian nationhood or identity is neither here nor there. Putin's essay now appears to have been the ideological blueprint for a bloody invasion. After fierce fighting in the Kiev area, the affluent commuter town of Bucha was occupied by Russian forces on March 12, 2022. It was retaken by the Ukrainians at the end of that month after a general Russian withdrawal from the region. The local authorities say that 458 civilians were killed during the Russian advance and occupation. Many of these deaths did not appear to be due to shelling or collateral damage. International journalists found streets strewn with bodies. Many had their hands tied behind their backs. A basement torture chamber was found with mutilated victims. There were reports of snipers firing indiscriminately on civilians and 25 reports of rape. By June, the UN had documented 50 unlawful killings. The Ukrainians have invited the International Criminal Court to oversee potential prosecutions. The Russians say it was all faked.
Была предпринята в городе Буча Киевской области.
This is the main cemetery in Bucha, the town which has become synonymous with one of the worst atrocities committed by Russian forces after they invaded in February of this year. Some 458 civilians were killed in Bucha, 50 still unaccounted for, and the graves immediately around me are those of the unidentified. I'm just looking, they're only known by numbers here. Earlier this week, there was a concluding investigation into the scale of the atrocities and human rights abuses that took place here. And only up until yesterday, they were still burying people here. This is the kind of place that goes down in history for all the worst possible reasons. During the occupation, there were efforts by town authorities to clear the bodies. These three men, Vitaly Chaika, Vitaly Mekakechko and Andrei Makarov, volunteered in the recovery effort. What motivated you to actually go out onto the streets? It must have been very risky.
Ну, конечно, да, есть какое-то было отвращение поначалу, но когда уже начались такие события, то оно все перекрывает.
Вообще не обращаешь внимания на это. Вот как-то не вникаешь.
Ну да, ты не думал.
Там все как-то быстро происходит, на самом деле.
Ну,
как-то день, да, так летел.
Их настолько много вот было, знаете, вот как идешь вот грибы, грубо говоря, уже до такой степени психики было, ну, все.
I mean, some of these scenes must have been very grisly. Had you ever seen a dead body before?
Ну, мы работали на службу, ну, ритуально. Да, я там был водителем. Мы согласились помочь, ну, в такое время.
A sense of duty to do this?
Ну, во-первых, это наш город.
Да, и чуть-чуть мы это как бы видели. И нам более, ну, воспринимать это.
Тем более, чем было заниматься? Так хоть
Ну, мы волонтерили, просто помочь. Как-то же, мы же все как-то единый организм, мы должны бороться с этим всем. Это же проблема не только военных, это проблема каждого человека, она касается.
Are you able to pick up normal life again?
Ну да, возвращаемся, конечно. Все стабильно, на рыбалку ходим. А что? Нам не нужен психолог, понимаете? Ну надо было бы, я бы готов бы лично был бы поехать еще где-то помочь, если надо было.
We meet Ukrainian photographer Aliena Grom. She moved to Bucha from her native Donetsk when war broke out there in 2014, never imagining that the conflict would follow her here. Her work is startling, haunting, beautiful. Her roots are in street photography and portraiture, but she's not an art photographer, she's a war photographer. Bucha has become synonymous with atrocity. For you, and I know you love it here, is Bucha different now?
Да, очень сильно поменялось. Буча отстраивается сейчас, и действительно очень тяжело уже заметить следы. То, что несколько месяцев назад здесь был такой ужас. Все зелено, цветут растения, чудесный воздух, поют птицы. Но тем не менее, вот эти воспоминания, которые были в Буче, они все равно оставили след. Иногда, когда я еду в машине по Буче, меня душат слезы. Я вижу, идут люди, и обычная мирная жизнь. Но тем не менее, нет-нет, да и закрадывается какое-то воспоминание о том, что здесь было. И я начинаю плакать. И вот все время один вопрос меня мучает. Зачем вы это сделали? Для чего вы это сделали? Как вы могли? Как вы могли разрушить такой мирок, такой чудесный, разрушить жизнь этих людей, которые погибли? Это ужасно.
Why do you think the Russians have done what they've done?
Но в первую очередь они пришли убивать. Они пришли на нашу землю убивать. Они пришли с оружием. Это была самая первая мотивация. Ну и со временем они озлобились. Страх и злоба и полная безнаказанность. Полная безнаказанность. Поэтому были совершены такие убийства.
From what I've seen of your work, much of it focuses very much on portraiture. What is it about portraiture that resonates with you so much? And is there a secret to getting the best out of a portrait?
Мне кажется, что портрет наиболее лучше расскажет об эпохе, времени и людях, которые жили в это время. Но мне нравится снимать эмоциональные такие портреты. Секрет есть, да. Я долго для себя пыталась понять, вот как снять настоящий портрет, вот честный портрет. И у меня был такой не очень хороший опыт. Я с человеком, с переселенкой, с которой хотела снять портрет, долго ходила, разговаривала, пыталась понять ее историю, вот чтобы вот был максимально эмоциональный портрет. Но сама так расчувствовала, что мне потом пришлось эмоционально восстанавливаться. Поэтому теперь, перед тем, как снять портрет, я прошу человека подумать о чем-то важном. И перед тем, как фотографировать, делаю большую паузу для того, чтобы он расслабился и сосредоточился. И в какой-то момент он перестает позировать и становится самим собой. И я знаю этот момент, и я фотографирую.
You see, I think that is a really significant point for me as a photographer. Because I'm so used to almost, I hate to use this term, but invading a country. You know, I come in as an outsider, whereas you are a local, you know, and they take you into your confidence. Do you think there is a problem being so close to the community?
Абсолютно облегчает. Я не чувствую никакого барьера. Я могу подойти к любому человеку на улице, вообще к любому, и начать разговоры, и спросить все, что угодно. И ну, у меня нет никаких барьеров, потому что я тоже, ну, участник этих исторических событий.
These people have been through an enormous amount. I mean, how do you win their confidence?
Я в первую очередь, я честна с этими людьми. Я подхожу и говорю, что я хочу рассказать миру о том, что с вами произошло. Я хочу, чтобы ну, запечатлеть ваши свидетельства в истории. И они начинают мне рассказывать свою историю. Но в первую очередь эти люди сами понимают, что очень важно рассказать миру, что произошло в Буче. Очень часто после того, как я беру интервью, мы или стоим плачем вместе, или я могу сказать, ну давайте я вас обниму. И действительно я обнимаю этого человека, потому что когда они мне рассказывают о своей боли, у меня идут мурашки по коже. То есть я переживаю им, сопереживаю вместе с ними. Но в первую очередь я снимаю именно для того, чтобы оставить эти свидетельства. Это настоящее свидетельство преступления. Вполне возможно, что они когда-то будут как обвинение для России. Я вот еще хочу спросить у Дэвида о войне вот в Украине. Есть ли что-то такое в Украине, что вас удивило? Вот что больше всего вас удивило здесь?
I think the thing that has struck me most is the determination, the defiance that Ukrainians have shown. I thought that maybe some cracks would begin to appear, some weaknesses, but I find people here just as defiant, if not more defiant now than they were in March. I'm not saying that's a surprise, I'm just saying it's remarkable.
Мы боремся за свободу и за свою землю. Это поэтому происходит. Я буду продолжать снимать фотографии, посвященные войне в Украине, до тех пор, пока не закончится война.
The Ukrainians have not only fought at places of the Russians' choosing, they've struck at targets in occupied Crimea. A series of explosions and fires have occurred at Russian bases there. Some are drone strikes, others sabotaged by special forces or partisans. Ukraine has also struck Russia itself. There have been cross-border strikes and operations around Belgorod. There has also been a car bombing in Moscow, seemingly an attack on Putin's advisor, Alexander Dugin. It killed Dugin's daughter, Daria. Ukraine has not claimed responsibility for any of these actions, but rumours are swirling and a Russian response seems likely. There is an undaunted mindset amongst Ukrainians. You know, they've toughened up throughout the 6 months of this war. They're unfazed. It's been just over a week now since the escalation of attacks on Crimea, and just a matter of days since the assassination of a leading Russian nationalist, Daria Dugin. And so far, a muted response, almost no response from Russia, which is making people a little bit apprehensive and nervous here in Kyiv. And behind me, the city is braced right now and over the next few days as we go into Ukraine Independence Day for what could be an escalation. And indeed, there is a wee tension. There's a nervousness around the city. Just a little while ago, the air raid siren went off, and it's the first time that I've noticed Kyivians moving indoors since I've been here. So, yeah, a little bit more tense than normal. The Russians love a good parade. Ever since the revolution, the May Day march past has been a fixture of the Kremlin calendar. It's a chance to flaunt Russian military might to the world. The Ukrainians have their own version, but it takes place on their Independence Day. This year, you might expect it to have been cancelled, but it's going ahead. with a dark, satirical twist.
So here I am on Khreshchatyk Street in downtown Kyiv, near the Maidan. And this is President Zelensky's idea of a Russian parade. All these burnt-out carcasses of Russian vehicles, tanks, armoured personnel carriers that have been dumped here in the centre of the city, not quite in the shape or form that was originally intended. This is kind of typical, really, of what I've come to realise is Ukrainian black humour. It's a huge, ballsy act of defiance. It's a kind of fingers up to the Kremlin. It's a great way of trolling them. It's a kind of psychological and morale boost to the people here in Kyiv. And just days before Ukrainian Independence Day, which is what this is really all about.
It takes some nerve to crack a joke when the response might be a barrage of missiles. But the Ukrainian spirit throughout has been characterised by dark humour. The internet has overflowed with memes and videos whose main function is to stick two fingers up to Moscow. Russian attempts to go viral have tended to fall flat and are generally mocked and turned against them. The most famous example of Ukrainian humour is also the crudest. In 2014, as things were kicking off in Donbass, a group of football fans from Kharkiv came up with a song which has become an anti-Putin anthem. It doesn't require much explanation. But the general threat level remains mortal. We head south to Mykolaiv, where there are rumours of a major offensive.
The checkpoints are getting more frequent, more thorough. There's a lot more military vehicles on the road, so you can feel the atmosphere changing from the comparative normality of Kyiv, the capital. And as we get closer to Mykolaiv, things getting a little bit more tense and obvious militarily. Well, we've just arrived in Mykolaiv, just heading into the city centre, and one of the accompanying Ukrainian military vehicles with us has just had a sort of breakdown come accident. I think it's the axle or something that's gone, so we're waiting on a truck, a pickup truck to take him away. It happened near a checkpoint, so we can't get out and film here, obviously. And, you know, as is often the case in sort of conflict or war-torn environments, one of the biggest dangers are actually road traffic accidents. I've seen that on a number of occasions. Behind me is a tributary of the River Bug, and a few dozen kilometres in that direction is the city of Kherson, which is controlled by the Russians, and from where they daily launch missile strikes into Mykolaiv. The battle between these two cities is a crucial one in the battle for the south in Ukraine, and in many ways the offensive by the Ukrainians here has already started, destroying bridges across the river into Kherson and isolating the Russian 49th Army there, who've been desperately trying to reinforce around that area. This is a key strategic point in the battle for the whole of South Ukraine. This is a downtown sort of industrial area of Mykolaiv. Every side street into this area is blocked off. It's like a labyrinth of checkpoints and block posts, as they call them here. And there's a lot of boarded up buildings. It's clearly been hit a number of times. But it's kind of spooky. You can hear the occasional crump of artillery or rocket fire. You know, we're within range. Where we're standing right now in this part of the city, hence we're wearing some of the body armour on at the moment, you know. The secret is to get what you need and move on. Don't hang around in a place too long, certainly not near strategic positions, military positions, bridges, things like that. Catch what you can and move on quickly. You're constantly aware that anything could drop from the sky at any point in time. Well, this is the very southeastern edge of Mykolaiv. It's actually eerily quiet here. These are huge apartment blocks. Normally I would imagine it'd be quite bustling. You can hear the occasional boom in the distance of artillery fire or rocket fire. It's impossible to tell what I'm hearing is outgoing or incoming. You know, just behind me there's a guy on a motorcycle in kind of khakis, fatigues, uniform. You know, no matter where you go with cameras around this part of Mykolaiv and in the city generally, people are incredibly suspicious. They've done sweeps across the city to pick up Russian collaborators and spies and agents. That's happened on a number of occasions. And people here are really spooked by anyone who looks suspicious, odd, foreign, out of place, and particularly if you've got cameras. This is a water distribution pipe stand here, which people have been using for months now. The water here in Mykolaiv is not, drinkable. So people come to this pipe stand every day. There's 10 of these around this city. And obviously, it's a real chore for people to do so. So, you get a sense that people are just really fed up. This is the regional government building in Mykolaiv. On March 29th, it was struck by a Russian missile. 37 people died. It was an attempted decapitation of the local administration here. Ukrainian culture and educational institutions also remain targets. This is the National University building in central Mykolaiv. It was hit by rockets just over a week ago at 2 a.m. in the morning. 2 a.m. in the morning is pretty much par for the course in terms of Russian bombardment. They tend to hit during the night, which deprives a lot of the citizens of sleep. There's some workmen trying to repair the communications on the building here. But, this is just one of many sort of civilian institutions which are systemically targeted by the Russians here in the city. Remember, this city has had sustained and heavy bombardment almost constantly since the Russian invasion in February. That's 6 months. One of the worst hit cities in the whole of Ukraine. The Mykolaiv Hotel was also hit.
Меня зовут Светлана. Я здесь работаю на стоянке. Как раз 5 дней до того, как это все прилетело, я только устроилась. Вот у нас была красивая гостиница. И здравствуйте, вот еще один прилет, второй. Вот так вот мы спали, ничего не подозревая, ждали прилетов, но было очень громко. Первый прилетел 5:02, второй, третий, четвертый попал в гостиницу. Ну вот все, что от гостиницы осталось.
We meet Val, a volunteer soldier who began fighting in 2014.
And here's how the building exploding and collapsing.
What can you tell me about the kind of operational role of your unit? How does it relate to the mainstream command structure of the Ukrainian armed forces?
We're like military freelancers. We're flexible because we're a small unit. We are experienced because, once again, most of us have fought before. We have specialists in different areas, right? We're well equipped. We have drones, we have snipers, we have medicine to back us up. So to an extent, we're a self-sufficient unit. But in modern war, one cannot operate independently, right? If you're not connected to the guys to the left, to the right, or in the immediate area where you operate, the chances are you'll be shot by your own. So we integrate ourselves into brigades, into special forces units. Basically, we help them where we can.
What about your ordinary life? What do you do for a living? Do you have a family?
I own a digital agency. We build websites, applications. It's an international company. So yeah, definitely not a military background. I'm a husband and a father, my beautiful wife and my beautiful 6-year-old daughter. I'm definitely not a professional military man, but the way things unfolded ever since 2014 is forcing me to pick up arms for the second time in my life to defend my country.
How do you keep things together, especially up here?
Well, I think not very hard, I'll be honest with you, but I think it has something to do with the fact that my first engagement was after the revolution, after Maidan revolution of 2014. I took a very active part in that, basically from day one to the day we kicked the president out of the country. And it was actually the first time in my personal life, right, when it became blatantly obvious that Russians do not wish us well. And immediately after the revolution was over, they took Crimea.
Given what's happened in the war, what do you think is the possibility of a sort of reconciliation between Ukraine and Russia?
I don't think that reconciliation with Russia in its current shape or form is possible anytime soon. It's not more about geography or geoeconomic outlook, it's more about what they have in their heads. Because right now we can hear not only Russian officials, not only Russian top brass, but just your average Russians using pretty much fascist lingo, saying that we as a country, we as a nation should cease to exist just because of who we are. We either have to become Russians or we have to cease to exist. As long as this mentality is in there, there's not going to be any reconciliation, there's not going to be any peace. So I honestly have a lot to lose if we don't win. Back in 2014, I did not have a child, I didn't have a house. Now I have my family, I have my child, I have my wife around me. I have my country that I put a lot of effort to, you know, keep the way it is today. So I honestly have a lot to lose, but on the other hand side, I realize that I have responsibility because I already have experience, I already have the knowledge, I already have the skills, I have morale and motivation to do that. So it's better me than somebody who is 20 years old with a romantic outlook and romantic view. It's better me than them. For us, it's our land, it's our country, we've lost enough of it, so we'll be fighting for every inch.
So, leaving Mykolaiv now, heading back to Kyiv, quite a long drive. Leaving behind a city which is still under bombardment, air raid sirens going off just as we left, and leaving behind a city which I think is kind of braced for what comes next, and there's a lot of speculation, a lot more talk about an escalation of some kind in the coming days. Who knows what side that will come from, the Ukrainian side or from the Russian side, but there is a growing sense that something is about to happen in Mykolaiv. As things turn out, it was the Ukrainians who take the initiative. The next day, the offensive began. The bridge we left over was shelled. Ukrainian armed forces crossed the river in small boats and surged towards Kherson.
By November, that city was back in Ukrainian hands. But the biggest story was to the north. The Ukrainians mounted an even bigger offensive in the lands surrounding Kharkiv. By September, the Russians had pulled back there too. It was a stunning set of victories. In response, Putin ordered a mass mobilization. Around 300,000 conscripts, poorly equipped and hardly trained, they were sent straight to the front into a deadly battle of attrition. Putin then rushed through a series of so-called referenda in each of the 4 wholly or partially occupied oblasts. All voted, unsurprisingly, to become Russian. In September, Putin declared them to be part of Russia. It was the biggest annexation of territory in Europe since the Second World War. The Ukrainian response was swift. Using what seemed to be a truck bomb, they hit the Kerch Bridge linking Crimea with mainland Russia. As winter wore on, the battles around Bakhmut came to symbolize the war. Russia hurled tens of thousands of Wagner Group mercenaries at well-defended Ukrainian positions. It came to be known as the meat grinder. The Ukrainians have proved their will to survive. Western powers have been galvanized to assist. Russia appears to be massing for another major assault, with rumours of up to 500,000 men amassed on the borders once more. 1 year on from the invasion, this war is far from over.